I'm Tina Kozak. I live in Durham. I've been here for about almost 8 years now and had moved from Boston. Um, Moving from that area, I'd seen a couple of projects that were similar to the tool library up there, particularly in the Somerville area. And they had a physical location and would do all sorts of neat work in the community. And also kind of a bigger focus, I think, just on kind of electronics and kind of getting folks to get their hands on working with things and becoming familiar with circuitry and, kind of stuff that traditionally you would have to pay for. Um, and I'm also kind of myself just an avid DIYer and love working outside, and I'm always getting into new projects and kind of a perpetual learner. And so I am constantly, as I, shift focus on things or continue on projects, and had found myself in need of this tool or that one. And I knew that it would be one-time use, or, I might need it for a week or a month, and then I'd probably never touch it again. And so moving down here, I didn't see anything that existed like the tool library. And so it was just as easy as starting, Facebook group and kind of just trying to talk to people I started meeting and knew in the community. And it kind of took off from there. I was ironically had started talking to my friend Jonah, who is one of the moderators as well, and he had a very similar idea. And so we were like, great, let's, I was like, I'll get it going, and we can kind of, the two of us kind of keep this going and see what it turns into. And then I held one kind of community meeting at first just to see if anybody was interested in kind of doing like a meet and greet. And that's how I met Kay, and they were the only kind of person to show up. And so we had a good opportunity to chat for a long time. They really just offered all of their support for it. And so became a moderator, and they've been super active and, and kind of helping to manage that community. So really it just was kind of finding a need in the community and finding an easy way to kind of throw it out there and see if anybody was interested in it. And, at this point, it's kind of turned into what it is, which I think is we're approaching 3,000 members, I think, for that one. So, yeah, it's kind of a self-sustaining group and just an insane loving and supporting community. And I've really loved to see kind of what has come out of it. Yeah, so in the tool library, folks generally will just kind of reach out for certain things that they need or advice or, asking for a hand with a project. And then folks from the community can respond and kind of offer what they have if it's available. And it's as easy as that. So the community kind of binds together and comes together kind of naturally and kind of supports each other. Literally that. Yeah, you request to join the group and you answer a question, and that's that. And then you're kind of on your way to this local treasure trove of tools in Durham. So yeah, we've tried to make it as easy as possible. The long-term vision for the tool library had always been to have a physical space. And that kind of is something that is still always in the back of my mind. One of the barriers, of course, is the cost of finding a physical space and kind of maintaining a physical space. So that's where a Facebook group or any kind of online platform, peer-to-peer sharing community has its advantages, just because it eliminates all of the overhead of physical space, tool maintenance, staffing, um, and just kind of truly relies upon and focuses on community.
Mhm.
I think one disadvantage, or a couple, I think probably of having it on Facebook is, one, it's on Facebook and, kind of this meta, owned organization, um, that I think does kind of restrict access in a way. And that's kind of another thing that's been, um, that I've thought a lot about, is just how I can expand access to that and kind of bring it into other spaces. I recently heard about something called Fat Llama, and I don't know if that's still around or not, but that would be like one platform that facilitates peer-to-peer sharing, and kind of brings it to a virtual space, but not specifically on Facebook. And I think that would be, one advantage to, or one way to kind of get around some of the barriers to access there.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the founding, I guess, principles or motivations for the tool library was always to, to really increase access and decrease consumption. And so that is, so increasing access is something that's always in the back of my mind. How can we kind of make this available to more and more people? I think the tools are certainly kind of the main focus, because, the material consumption that comes around, and in a way just kind of, um, you know, there are issues, related to income and, kind of, um, privilege to access certain things by just being able to go out and purchase something if you need it, right? Not everybody has that ability. And so that certainly is a main focus, is just having access to physical items that you might need at free of charge. But I think really the bigger thing is having access to that community, because people come through and support you in ways that, are really surprising. And I've seen that at least once in the community, where folks have really kind of gone beyond what I ever really imagined the tool library being, um, and just really engaging with people on a very human level, and really using it as a community in that sense, truly the sense of community. So there was a story where somebody had a car breakdown, and they were the sole provider for their household, and they needed this very specific part, um, and a specific tool to get this part installed. And so um, they reached out in the tool library and kind of posted that they needed this item, and somebody responded, offering to not only offer the tool to install it, but also the part and the labor to help them get everything going and get themselves back on their feet, in that sense. So yeah, just really incredible people that work behind it, that um, is really surprising and really beautiful to see. I think it's really empowering too, because I think, and that is something that, for the physical space for a tool library, I think that was something that was always a motivation for me, is to have things like workshops, um, because so many people, and particularly, folks who identify as female, and non-binary folks, I think, are somewhat limited in just kind of like access and education when it comes to tools, and kind of building and fixing and doing all of that stuff. And so I think, yeah, it's so important to just allow people to feel confident and be empowered to do that. And I think more often than not, it's way easier than people think it's going to be. But it is just a matter of being supported. So there are a few rules, and those, some of them, of course, are kind of explicitly stated when you join. One of them, the first one being that this is a no payment community. I think that it changes the mission, it changes the atmosphere, it changes the interaction between people when you start putting a price on things, or people are allowed to start promoting their own services for payment. And so everybody involved has always really been avid about maintaining that focus on keeping it free and, keeping that spirit of sharing at the heart of the community. And I think, beyond that, there are just general rules of being really respectful to each other and treating each other, as somebody in your community. And of course, respecting their physical property if somebody lends that to you. Knowing that somebody did incur a cost to acquire this. And so being respectful of that, I think, is just part of that as well. So those are kind of the bigger things, kind of moving in the background, just to kind of make sure that, it doesn't change the mission of the group. I think it's pretty communal. There are the three of us behind the scenes who are removing posts that are super spammy or, might kind of cross boundaries that we're trying to maintain. But beyond that, it really is, we really do rely on every individual in the community to kind of chip in and, report things that are off, or, kind of do their own due diligence to make sure that it continues running in a way that is valuable for everybody. And it's been so self-sustaining in a way that, kind of, it feels like I really don't have to do much at all. I think there are other people who, have put, a lot of work into community engagement in the sense of asking questions and, really kind of digging into that. And I tried that out for a while, and I think, some people responded, but I think really the spirit of this community is a little bit different than some of the others. And so I try to just kind of respect what that was and what I was feeling, from the community as far as what they wanted. So it's really just kind of people who jump in and ask questions when, they have them, and answer them, when they are available to answer them. And there was, one member who suggested kind of creating like quick chats for folks to do faster tool finds. And I thought that was great, totally kind of, I don't know, yeah, unsolicited, like, great idea. And I love that because it really is something that I want everybody to be involved with. So luckily that's been minimal work on my end. Yeah, I think, well, I think one, it does keep people more involved because I think it makes people feel more invested in a way, because it's something that they're actively part of maintaining and shaping. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is just kind of keeping people engaged with that. And really feeling like a sense of, I don't want to say ownership, because I think that's the wrong word, but I guess investment, I guess, in a way. It does feel like something personal to them, because they do have, every person does have a part and a say in what that community looks like and feels like. And I think that just allows it to keep people in that space, but also to evolve as it needs to. As the membership changes, I'm sure that it will continue to evolve to kind of reflect all of those different people who are in it. Now it's just kind of where it's like battling bots, really.
Mm,
And I think anybody in the digital space kind of is having the same issue.
mm,
Will find uh, you know, people or non-humans who are trying to get into the group. And so we've put some simple screening questions in place to try to eliminate any of the bots that are trying to kind of make their way in. And so there is a challenge there because you see people who are trying to join, and maybe they don't answer the question, but you see that they're in a bunch of other local groups, or they answer the question incorrectly. And I think now it's just a matter of kind of doing our own work in the back end to just really maintain the integrity of the group. And so sometimes that there is a challenge of making hard decisions to, decline somebody's request because they're not meeting the very simple requirements. So sure, yeah, I think so. I mean, I would consider myself kind of on the lower end of that because I think there are so many people who are really working day to day to create these spaces and these organizations that are super active in the community. But I do think that there is a need and a space for something like the tool library because it does prioritize access over ownership, and so that I think is really kind of an ethos that's at the heart of the Durham community just in general. And we can see that reflected in the number of organizations that you've probably been speaking with for this project. But the I think each organization and each group, regardless of how it operates and kind of how far it expands into the community, is doing work to create more sustainability in all of those aspects. I think, specifically to the tool library, I'd heard a statistic a long time ago that like a drill is only used for something like 13 minutes in its lifetime. And
mm,
you think about something that probably every household has, right? But you think about other tools that people are buying and having them just sit there, and there is kind of a huge environmental component to that. Um, waste is a massive issue. Everything today is kind of a single-use disposable item, and we have things like Amazon that ship things to your door sometimes the same day in the click of a button. And so it becomes very easy to really kind of feed into that consumer kind of consumption model. And I think this does in a small way, try to combat that in allowing people to have another option. And it might be slightly less convenient to say, if you're working on a bigger project, to collect multiple items from potentially different people. But I think if that is um, kind of part of your personal motivations, then I think that minor inconvenience kind of outweighs all of, or kind of the the environmental and social impact that being able to borrow versus buy has, I think outweighs the minor inconvenience of having to drive and pick up a few different things, and maybe wait a day. Um, so yeah, I think collectively and individually, all these organizations are kind of working to change that model, or at least offer an alternative. We actually, I had spoken with somebody who started the Raleigh Tool Library, and they kind of had reached out to make sure that there wasn't any conflict there. And of course there's not, because there isn't any ownership of anything. And I think it makes a lot of sense for each community to have their own. But I think, the advice that I might have is just to just get started in any way that you can. I think it can be really overwhelming to think about, kind of how to do it, and, all of these things, maybe there are financial limitations or whatever it is, like you can always find a reason not to do something. But I think if there's a need and you're really motivated to do it, I think it can be as easy as starting a group and, watching how it evolves. So that would be my advice. And other than that, I think just really reaching out to other members of other sharing communities. I think there are so many resources out there. I early on had reached out to the folks at the Asheville Tool Library, and they were super helpful in answering a lot of questions and offered their support if we ever did get to the point where we were going to offer a physical space. And so I think that too, just, reaching out to other people who are doing this work and seeing what they have to say, and kind of relying on that, and also making it as community responsive as possible. I think those are kind of the three. It is for me, for sure. Again, it's kind of, it's been very minimal as far as the required effort, which has been very nice and very surprising. But I do think that for me personally, I've always been really focused on both environment and, social equality. I'm a beekeeper. So like, and I was raised in the country. A big thing for me is just kind of a real connection with nature and the earth, and being more mindful of our impact. But also, yeah, I think on a social level, trying to find ways to kind of bridge the gap that there can be between access to things, and remove barriers to access, and just kind of like doing what we all can to help each other just achieve what we want, whether that is somebody asking a question that they might not have somebody to turn to, or it is access to an item. That's kind of part of the vision for me. I also recently read something that I thought I hadn't really thought of before, but somebody mentioned in an article about kind of having something like this instituted at municipal level. And I think that to me would make so much sense. We have public libraries for information, and, even they've extended that to things like seeds and other things that you can sometimes find in the library. But I think they're having something like this that is funded at a government level, I think would make a ton of sense, I think especially in Durham, just to build a community that is more equitable, especially as we see Durham grow and we see kind of more income disparity. And I think anything that we can do in any organization or group that exists to help people access what they need are going to become more important. I will say that this has, even just being involved with this group has allowed me to meet a lot of really interesting people who have kind of been active in the community for a really long time. One of the people who is a member, her name is Cindy, and she had donated a couple of things to for me to kind of hold on to and allow people to kind of borrow it. And she had been active in this group called Swoop, and it was, I can't remember the acronym now. It was essentially just a group of women who were skilled in the trades, and they would have projects, community projects that they would go out and volunteer their time to do. And that could be building a ramp or kind of building infrastructure for an elderly person to be able to age in place, or building a playground for a local school or organization. And so, you know, she had mentioned, potentially, the use of the tool library being expanded to things like that to be able to support the community in another very tangible way. And so I might actually loop that back into the piece of advice that, for folks starting a tool library or other organization, and that too, I guess, would just be in that listening spirit, but kind of listening to other people who have been active in your community. And because they might have ideas that helps you kind of not necessarily change direction, but kind of shape something that is different than what you originally envisioned, but has potentially, exponential impact. So we'll see if the tool library ever gets there. I'm not sure, if it will expand into that space, but I certainly know now that there are resources to start something like that. If I ever find the bandwidth, or, if somebody's interested in starting that, I can point them to a person who is, had experience in that. So I don't know. I just would say there are so many interesting and talented and supportive people in the community. So it's a wealth.